Hey guys, this is Dave with Audio In, and I know it's been a while since I've posted a review on Audio In, but I've been trying to get caught up with some stuff as far as dongle reviews on the Gazaudio channel. But now I'm back, and I have the Dunu SA6 EST. And of course, this is the fourth iteration of the SA6, but as indicated by the name, it adds 2 EST drivers to the driver configuration. So now we have 6 balanced armature drivers plus 2 ESTs. So as usual, we'll go over the contents of the package, we'll talk about the design and specifications, and then we'll jump into the sound. We have a lot to talk about, so let's get started. So this is everything that is included in the box. We have the IEMs and cable. The cable is a modular cable, so they've also included both a 4.4 balanced termination and then a 3.5 single-ended termination. We then have a very nice case. This is the newer case that they released with the SA6 MK2. And then as usual, of course, they've also included an excellent assortment of tips, including some of my favorites, the SNS tips. Now, they've bumped the price up just a little from the SA6 MK2 from $579 to $639, which makes sense with the addition of the 2 EST drivers. And again, the total driver count has been bumped up by 2 from 6 to 8 because we have the 6 balanced armature drivers and those are combined with 2 EST drivers. And going back to the cable, this is the same Hulk Pro mini cable that is included with the SA6 MK2 as well. Now, as far as the design, I absolutely love it. They call it the custom nebula faceplate, I believe, and it looks really, really cool in pictures, but it looks even better now that I'm seeing it with my own eyes. And the build quality, as usual, is also excellent, but I wouldn't expect anything else from Dunu. They're just one of those companies that you can always depend on them to provide a very high level of build quality. Now, one thing I did notice is that they used a metal nozzle instead of a full resin nozzle like they've used in the past on previous SA6 variants, which is totally fine. It fits my ears perfectly, and I've had no issues at all with discomfort. Although if you own the original SA6 or even the SA6 MK2 and you like their fit, just know that the nozzle diameter is slightly larger with this release, and the shape of the body is also a little bit different as well. So there is the possibility that this could fit your ears differently, but again, for me personally, it's perfectly fine. I've had no discomfort at all. And then going back to the cable again, I know there are differing opinions in regards to its rigidity. I personally like this cable a lot, and while it may not be the softest cable out there, for me, I'm more concerned about manageability. So I don't want to have to deal with tangling, and I definitely don't want to have to struggle with the cable when I'm trying to fit the IEMs into the case either. While this isn't necessarily a super soft cable, it is still soft enough and it's easy to roll up and store in the case. And I don't think I've ever had any issues with tangling at all. And otherwise, the build quality and construction of the cable is just very good, and it looks great with the IEMs as well. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the sound. Now, one thing I should point out really quickly before we jump into the sound is that unlike the original SA6 and the SA6 MK2, the EST version does not have a bass boost switch on the back of the shell. So you've only got one tuning option, but the good news is that the tuning is really great, especially if you like the original SA6. And the reason I say that is because the EST version has a little more in common with the original SA6 than it does with the MK2 version. The MK2 is going to have a bassier presentation, and also the mid-range is a little more relaxed and less forward, which puts even more focus on the bass. So the MK2 is basically going to have a more fun and a slightly more engaging presentation than the EST and the original SA6. And then there are some similarities and also some differences between the original SA6 and the EST as well. The similarities being in their bass and upper mid-range presentation, and then there are some differences in their treble presentations. So on paper, if you were to lay the graphs of each of those, the SA6, the original, and the EST on top of each other, what you would see is a very similar, not exact, but very similar tuning from 20 Hertz all the way up to about 3K. And then the original SA6 also has an energy increase after that between around 4 and 5K, while with the EST version, that 4 to 5K region actually drops off. And then from about 6K upward, again on paper, it appears that the treble energy between the two are about the same. And the reason I say it only appears to be about the same is because what I'm actually hearing isn't necessarily reflective of what I'm seeing on the graphs. Because to me, I'm actually hearing a little more treble energy in the EST than I am with the original, which in my opinion is a very good thing because it actually brings the EST's tuning a little closer to my tuning preference, because that was actually one of my small criticisms with the original SA6. I had wished it had just a little more treble energy. Now, as far as the signature of the EST, it is going to take a more neutral approach to its tuning like the original, again, as opposed to the MK2's slightly more V-shaped approach. Now, if we break things down a little further, starting with the bass, in terms of the bass quantity, like the original, the bass presentation is going to be a little more neutral. However, it does have a little extra mid-bass presence, which is going to bring a little bit of richness and warmth into its overall presentation. And it also adds a nice amount of mid-bass punch as well. For this being a BA bass, now I have to say, it does a remarkable job with dynamics, just like the original, but actually maybe even better than the original. And what's great is you get all of the benefits of the BAs having that BA tightness and that speed. And it's also very controlled as well, as far as making sure to avoid any bass bleed into the mid-range. Now, speaking of the mid-range, this is another area where they brought back some of that upper mid energy that was present with the original, but with the SA6 MK2, again, they took a little more of a relaxed approach with. So vocals and some instruments are going to be a little more forward with this version over the MK2. Now, that's not to say the EST's upper mid-range is overly forward. It's not at all. As a matter of fact, as far as my tuning preference, for me, it's just about right, especially when I contrast it against the bass energy. However, when I step back and listen to the overall presentation, there are maybe moments where I felt my attention kind of being pulled towards the upper mids and treble. And again, I don't feel like vocals are overly forward as far as them dominating the mix, but just like the original, it could be generally considered to be more of a mid-centric type signature. And what I like about them kind of reverting back to the style of tuning with the upper mids is that this extra bit of upper mid energy gives the mid-range a greater sense of clarity. And in terms of the overall mid-range detail and resolvability, in my opinion, between the original and the MK2 and the EST is giving me the most natural and again, in my opinion, overall the best mid-range performance between the three. And I think maybe the reason the mid-range works so well for me is possibly because of the way they approached the tuning of the treble, because obviously all of the frequencies work together. They don't work in isolation, or at least that's the goal, but each part of the tuning is dependent on the other parts. And I think that maybe the reason the mids are hitting me a little bit differently is because of the way, again, they approach the treble tuning. And I don't know if this will work for everyone, but it does work really good for me. This is probably my favorite part of the tuning because the treble sounds really smooth, really natural. It's very detailed, and it never reached the point of sounding sharp or harsh, but it just maintained really nice energy, not only in the lower treble, but in the upper treble as well. So it's also going to deliver nice amounts of air and shimmer. Now, in regards to its technical performance, in terms of detail, the EST is basically on par with the MK2. And the reason I say basically or almost is because I do think the MK2 might bring just a little more micro details into the picture because of the added upper treble, and the MK2 has a more open presentation as well. So the soundstage is just a little wider, and it maybe even brings some additional forward depth as well. But remember, the MK2 also takes more of a V-shape approach to its tuning, so you're going to get boosted bass and boosted treble compared with the EST's more neutral presentation. And for me personally, I actually prefer the tuning of the EST over the MK2's. But going back to its technical performance, I consider the EST to have at least an average width soundstage, and I do feel like its forward depth is still good, but the imaging and the separation, the layering are excellent because the positional cues of instruments and vocals are spot on. But beyond that, they have excellent focus and density as well. So even though it's not a super open presentation, it's still a very immersive presentation, and I would still consider this to have above average technical performance for this price range, which brings us to comparisons. So my top two favorite sets within this price range right now are the Xuanwu Gate and the Pilgrim Noir, with the Noir actually taking the top spot and then the Xuanwu Gate falling ever so slightly behind. And if I were to try and fit the EST in here somewhere, I would definitely say for sure it's in my top three. And I would even say in terms of tuning, I actually prefer it over the Xuanwu Gate. And its technical performance is at least on par with the Xuanwu Gate. So that pretty much, I guess, automatically moves it into that second spot. But then the question becomes, can it compete with the Noir? And in my opinion, absolutely yes, it does. In terms of technical performance especially, I would say it's right in line with the Noir. Now, I do still prefer the overall tuning of the Noir over the EST, but that's just by a little bit. And the reason I say that about the Noir is because its bass and mid-range tuning is just a little more refined, in my opinion, and controlled as far as the way they handled the bass shelf and the lower mids. But the upper mids and treble are tuned very well with both of these sets. And I'm just kind of basing this on which IEM I've been reaching for more frequently, and that is still the Pilgrim Noir. But the EST is right there, and it's also $150 less than the Noir. As a matter of fact, I would still consider the SA6 EST to be the better value between the two, because really you are getting a slightly better return for your investment. So the SA6 EST absolutely gets a very strong audio in recommendation. Well done again, Dunu. So that concludes my review of the Dunu SA6 EST. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch. If you like my content, please take a second and hit that subscribe button. Also, if you would please comment on this video, please like this video, please share this video. I hope you guys have an awesome day.